Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Gabo. Everybody calls me Gabo, but my real name is Gabriel Garcia Marquez. But you can call me Gabo. It helps me staying young. 1927. 1927. That means I'm over the 90 years now. Don't tell anybody. In my country, we say that the heart of a man remains young until his last breath. By the way, I am Colombian. My name now is well known all around the world, but as every author, my beginnings were quite difficult.
It is said that your grandparents had a lot of influence in your writing.
If I remember correctly, we were 11 in the house without counting my mother and father, my parents. When my parents fell in love with each other, the times were not those of today. My father, Gabriel Eligio Garcia, was rather poor and métis. He was not at all the kind of man that my grandfather wanted for his daughter. My grandfather, I used to call him Papi Lelo. He was a veteran of the war, a well-respected man and a hero for the Colombians. My father used to seduce my mother with violent serenade and love poems, even after my Papi Lelo impulsed him to leave the city to try to separate the young couple. They tried everything to get rid of my father. But time passed, and finally Papi Lelo allowed my father to marry my mother. But he would never be able to overcome his pride and to attend the wedding. That is my Papi Lelo. That was life at the time of my parents. This tragic but comic situation inspired me, and I could not prevent developing it in my novel Love at the Time of Cholera. You should read it. My grandparents raised me. My grandfather taught me that there were no greater moral lack than killing a man, a lesson that I learned well and that I used in my work. He was a master at storytelling. My grandmother also played a very great role in the developing of the little gentleman I was. My grandmother, Tranquilina Igaran, had that way of treating the extraordinary things as if they were quite natural. Her house was filled with stories of ghosts, premonition, prophecies, of course all ignored by my grandfather. She's the one who is the source of the magical view, superstitious and supernatural reality that I use in my work. I love the unique way she had to recount the most fantastic and improbable events, as if they were irrefutable truth.
Some say that you had a relationship with Fidel Castro.
During my life, I jumped several times from a job to another, specifically in journalism. Right after the Cuban Revolution, around 1960, Filino Mendoza, the founder of Prensa Latina, that was the press of the Latin America, he observed my writings and invited me to participate in the formation of a group of young journalists. This opportunity allowed me to visit several countries, including Havana, which bring back good memories. I met one day, and by pure chance, Fidel Castro. My friendship with him has been often criticized because of the fact that he was making so much noise at that time. I've always given great support, both moral and financial, to the revolutionary movement of Latin America. Then, I left aside my writings for a short time to concentrate myself on politics, which interested me greatly. I also traveled to Switzerland, France, Spain, and New York, working in the offices of Prensa Latina. At that time, John F. Kennedy was elected President of the United States, and the Cubans were then called to take refuge in the United States. That was a very stressful period for me. With my co-workers, we were often insulted and threatened by phone. I did not stay very long at that position. I ended up resigning. Then, with my family, we went to Mexico, we wanted to live in Mexico. On our way crossing the southern United States, I discovered the American region that inspired the work of William Faulkner, that author who inspired me greatly in my work. At the same time, I left aside my friendship with Fidel Castro and also my interest for the action taken by Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. I went back to writing and cinema. At this time, in 1967, I wrote my novel 100 Years of Solitude, amazed by all of the experience that I had acquired before. 10 years later, in 1981, I wrote another great success, Chronicle of a Death Foretold.
The press said that you were not expecting to receive a prize for your writing.
That was in 1982. One day, the phone rang at home. That was Pierre Schori, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden. He wanted to tell me that I have been elected for the Nobel Prize for Literature. In honor of, that was the title, my novels and short stories in which fantasy and reality combine into a world rich with imagination, reflecting a continent's life and conflicts. I turned around and looked at my wife and said, oh no. I had then to improvise a press conference in front of 100 of journalists that were already standing in front of my house like animals. But I felt that by giving me this prize, they considered the literature of American subcontinents, and at the same time they wanted to reward all of the literature of this region.
The way you deal with the reality in your books has been called magic realism. I feel that European readers generally see the magic in the stories that you tell, but do not perceive the reality behind it.
My last word would be that this is probably because their rationalism prevents them to seeing that reality is not only limited to the price of tomato and eggs.